Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My mission is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, is doing during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple crises: the global pandemic, Brexit, and of course, the ongoing and accelerating collapsing of capitalism, the state, and the climate through this decade. To do this, I need people like you, dear listener. Most of all, I need people who are in Leeds or who are from Leeds to come on this show and be my guests. So please join me and help me with this mission whenever and however you can. Critically, I will need people like you, dear listener, as financial backers. Please consider supporting or donating to this project. You can do so with a £1 monthly donation via either Patreon or Ko-fi, or you could donate any one-off amount to Working Hours via either Ko-fi or through the LibrePay button on the About page of Western Studios' website. Thank you. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. What did you want to be when you grew up?
That is a really tricky question. I'm from Poland. When I was in primary school, I didn't even think who I would like to be, in the future. When I was in the high school, in the second year, I didn't know anything about that kind of. I didn't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But during the second year, I got a job in a construction site. And then I started to think maybe the construction area might be quite a good idea. And the reason why is because I wanted to create something. I wanted to design something and to build something. And that pushes me to learn more about the mathematics, physics, and more that kind of subjects, topics, and architecture. That allows me to apply for the civil engineering university in Poland. But I didn't have any idea before I was in second year in my high school. And then from this time, I wanted to join, or I wanted to start working in the construction industry. Then in the second year of my MPhil degree, at the university, I started to think that maybe I would like to get as well some kind of academic position or academic experience. And then after my master degrees in Poland, I decided to apply for a PhD in concrete, so it's just structural material. And I finished my PhD, and since then I'm in academia as a research associate or research fellow. During my PhD studies, I worked also in the industry from as a structural engineer and then concrete technologist, on-site engineer. So I gather the experience both from the academic point of view and from practical point of view. And therefore, now when I'm developing now my skills and my career in academia, those kind of all technical, practical, and theoretical background is very useful for my future research. But yeah, it evolved over the time. So I'm not now a full-time structural engineer or civil engineer in the construction. I don't build things, but now I'm just trying the people or the construction industry to do better job.
You're listening to Series 3, Episode 37, and to my guest Michal Drewniok. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 3rd of August 2022. Hello, loves. Welcome to any new listeners. Nice to have you here. So after this episode, there won't be another one until Friday. I'm going to do what I can to deliver new episodes when and where I can, but I have to just worry about what I can realistically motivate myself to do right now, rather than what I think the release schedule should be. When one drops, I'll promote it on the socials. This is a long intro, so let's kick off with it. Michal Drewniok is a research fellow in transforming foundation industries at the University of Leeds. His background is in civil engineering, and he holds a PhD in concrete technology from Silesian University of Technology in Poland. Prior to his current position, he worked as a site engineer and concrete and production technologist at Precast Concrete Manufacture. In 2015, Michal joined the University of Cambridge as a research assistant in material efficiency in construction. Michal was involved in two projects, both centered on making better use of steel in construction. The first explored the barriers to steel reuse, and the second was looking at the role of material efficiency in building conception and design in construction. In March 2018, he joined the Structures Group at the University of Cambridge, working on the project Minimising Energy in Construction, exploring the practices of structural engineering that lead to structural inefficiencies. In the years 2019 to 2020, he took on an internship to study the relationship between embodied carbon and different reinforced concrete floor systems, and was involved in two projects: post-construction assessment of embodied carbon for civil engineering building in Cambridge, and barriers to low-carbon concrete technologies in the UK. In 2020, in collaboration with Expedition Engineering, Michal received a knowledge transfer fellowship on climate-compatible decision-making in the construction sector. In 2021, Michal joined the University of Bath as a research associate in efficient concrete structures to explore ways to achieve carbon reduction targets in UK construction. Since January 2018, Michal is a main coordinator of the Resource Efficiency in Construction and the Built Environment, a forum for academics, architects, designers, engineers, contractors, and policymakers who would like to explore ideas around how the built environment can deliver future energy and material services, while at the same time reducing resource use and environmental impact. In 2021, Michal joined the Low Carbon Concrete Group that in 2022 developed the Low Carbon Concrete Route Map. Now, when I talk about how there is more happening on climate than we are aware of, Michal jumps out to me here as a great example of this point. If you'll pardon the pun, he is literally doing concrete work on climate change, and currently doing that here in Leeds. Doesn't that fill you with civic pride? It shouldn't, because it's someone else's achievement. Anyway, I feel really lucky to be in a city that has declared a climate emergency and where some serious work has actually begun on coping with this civilization-destroying process. It's not enough yet, but it's there, it's begun, that matters. For me, I will know the real work on climate is being performed in earnest when it's embedded in all social production in the same way that producing CO2 is right now. When I can call up an employment agency and the first thing they offer me is a choice of either a part-time or a full-time role of 4 days a week, piloting a drone that plants food forests in Bramley rather than having to help airlines, automakers or utility companies to pour gases into the air that poison our lungs and cooks and washes away our societies. Okay, now let's get on with this episode of Working Hours with Michal Drewniok.
What is your day job then now? So what is it that you do now? I mean, you've kind of alluded to it anyway, but, let's just put the question out there and then start with that. Yeah.
So currently I'm at the University of Leeds in the School of Civil Engineering, and I'm the research fellow in foundation industries. Mm-hmm. That's the project led by University of Cranfield. And currently I'm involved in the work which is related to foundation industry focused on cement. So cement is one of the foundation industries which produces cement, which is mainly used in concrete, which is mainly used in construction. So that leads to my experience and to my research. So currently I'm looking at how we can use less cement or how we can reduce embodied carbon from cement production. Mm-hmm. But it's also related to the end use of the cement. So how we can minimize or how we can reduce concrete use in construction, mm-hmm. how we can make our buildings or our projects more efficient, how we can use less materials, how we can use those kind of materials more efficiently. And why cement and concrete is because of my background. So I'm concrete technologist. My PhD was around concrete. So from my education, I started looking at concrete. And so that's what I'm doing now. So how we can minimize the impact of cement production and cement use in concrete and other materials.
So how the hell do you do a PhD in concrete? How is there that much to know about it?
So it's really interesting because we think that we know about concrete almost all, but concrete is some kind of living material. So you can't have exactly the same mix on construction site. So even if the mix or the ingredients are very similar, you are not getting exactly the same concrete at all in your construction site. So because you are mixing 3, 4, 5 different ingredients, you end up with a different concrete with a different properties, with the different properties of fresh concrete, which is really important, from the buildability perspective. So how the concrete is placed, cast, or placed on the construction site, how it becomes a hardened concrete. So what are the properties and what durability of the concrete is in the end of when the concrete sets. So even if we know much about concrete, we don't know all of those kind of aspects in this kind of area. So it's not like steel. So if you have steel, you just take iron ore, you melt it, and you produce steel. And once you produce the steel properties didn't change over the time. It can rust, but the rust is not a physical property. It's just changing the shape or changing the cross section. However, in concrete properties can degrade over the time because of the different exposure of the environment. So if you have rain or you have chloride or you have water from sea, all influence on the properties of concrete, and depending on the ingredients and depending on the different types of ingredients, different type of cement, aggregates, and lots of other things, it depends on how long it can last in the environment when it's placed. And because we use concrete almost everywhere, we have to know what concrete we should use where. And because of almost unlimited variabilities, it's very difficult to find the right answer.
So what is the variables? What are the, is it just like making some kind of cake mix, like a dry cake mix where you're just taking all different minerals and putting them together? I mean, is there a consistent sort of basis? What's like the eggs and flour of concrete?
Okay, that's it. Yeah. So in general, concrete consists with 3, 4 ingredients. So one of the most important is cement, or the binder.
Right.
So a binder is usually cement, which binds all the other ingredients.
Yeah.
The other is sand, which should be as a filler of the aggregate in the in concrete. But sand is the small particles. And then we have coarse aggregates, which is larger, and depending on the size of the aggregates, you can create different properties of concrete, of course. So cement, sand, coarse aggregates, and water. If you put everything all together, the cement starts to bind all the ingredients together, and from very easy recipe, you get artificial rock. And the end of the day, the artificial rock can last. Depends on the durability of those kind of ingredients. And of course, or during the time, the concrete technology changes. So apart from those 4 things, so cement, sand, coarse aggregates, and water, we are starting to add more or other things to concrete, such as supplementary cementitious materials, which are, for example, waste from the other industries, such as a granulated ground blast furnace from steel production, or fly ashes from coal power plants, to utilize those materials. But of course, adding those materials to concrete, we change the properties, both fresh and hardened concrete, and we can even extend the durability or increase durability quite significantly. And of course, because the chemistry also matters, we found a way how we can modify fresh concrete and concrete itself by adding different polymers or different chemical additives for concrete to flow faster or to set earlier or to have much more air in the volume, or that allows concrete to last in the freezing temperatures, in the low temperatures. So there are lots of different aspects in this kind of area, but in general, having 4 ingredients you can create with it, of course, with a specific proportions, you can create concrete, and concrete itself is well known. Maybe it's the material that was used 100, 120, 150 years ago. So, and even so, the concrete that we know today that contains Portland cement is used over the last 150 years. But of course, we know Roman concrete with a different type of binders, which was used thousands of years ago. So it all depends on the binder.
Yeah. So in terms of your binder and your cements, are they are they generally from readily available materials, like abundant materials? Or because I know there's a shortage of sand, isn't there? Like which to a lot of people is like, what sand? Sand's everywhere, but it's like sort of specific kinds of sand, isn't it? So yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if we can just go back to cement a little bit. So cement, if we like to make it very easy. So the cement is a burned limestone with different other additional ingredients. But we take limestone from the quarry, then we put it into the kiln with a temperature of 1450 degrees, and then we burn it. We are adding a little bit gypsum, and we create the Portland cement. And so that's the very natural material, but of course it requires very high heat.
Is that where the carbon comes in?
Yes. Yeah. So the carbon in cement comes from the fuel that requires to create that kind of high temperature, but that's only half of the problem of cement. The other problem is that during the cement production process, because limestone contains carbon, during the cement production process, by burning limestone, it releases CO2 to the atmosphere. So those are the process emissions, and process emissions itself are approximately 40 to 50% of all emissions from cement production. So that's because of those kind of process emissions. This is the cement production is really hard to decarbonize because the process emissions we can avoid those kind of process emissions.
Yeah, it's kind of like the thing that you have to do in order to get that thing.
Exactly. So it depends, of course. The share of the CO2 that is from process emissions depends on the fuel that you are using. If you are using low carbon fuel or biofuels or other things, you can decrease the emissions from fuel itself. But you can't avoid, unfortunately, emissions from decarbonation of limestone, unfortunately. So that's why the new strategies is to find some kind of new source of calcium oxide materials that allows you to produce cement without releasing CO2 to the atmosphere.
So it's a process of kind of going through, does this material work? Does this material work?
Yeah. So this area, we find we have some technologies that allows you to avoid that kind of emissions. The tricky thing is that Portland cement, which is very high carbon intensive. So Portland cement is the highest carbon intensive binder from all of cements, because it contains 95% of clinker, which is directly taken from limestone and other ingredients during the burning process. And the Portland cement is really popular, and it's very it's commonly used globally. So currently, cement production is globally is approximately 4.2 billion tons per year. So this kind of volume makes that we can't find any other material that can substitute cement in the construction industry. So that's why even if we have technologies that allows us to produce alternative binders, we cannot currently scale it up for the current demand. So that is quite a problem in general in the construction industry now. So we would need to avoid the emissions. At the same time, we would like to provide the service, which are buildings, which are highways, which are drains, or all other infrastructure, low carbon infrastructure. But to do that, we have to build those kind of infrastructure projects using concrete. And because of the volume, we cannot find any suitable other materials. For now, we are trying to do that.
So quite the challenge then.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. So about cement and concrete, and you are asking also about the
sand,
the shortage. Yeah. So we can't use, unfortunately, all the sand. So there are different types of sands that are available. I think you are familiar with sand from Sahara. So everyone claims that we can use it for concrete, but
it's no good.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's not good because of the shape of the sand is not suitable for concrete, and this makes that the fresh concrete might not be suitable for the use, or the properties of the concrete might be not, or the concrete itself might not be durable,
stable or good, or
So,
or maybe inconsistent. Does it make it inconsistent, or
the consistency as well? But majorly, we are using for concrete. We are using river sand, which is rounded. In Sahara, the deserts have sand which are sharp. So we can't use it for concrete. And of course, the other issues with chemical compositions and other that might be in the sand also is an issue. So, and the shortage, yes. So if we can imagine sand by weight, so sand by weight is something like 20%. So within the concrete, 20% of the weight is sand. And in the UK itself, we use approximately 80 or 90 million tons of concrete. So 20% of this is sand. So we in the UK have the sand, and we have that kind of natural resources. But in other countries, it starts to become a huge issue. And sand in general is really cheap. So it's not profitable to transport it for the long distances, more than 50 miles or something. And because it's cheap, the transportation and then the emissions are really, really in this kind of conversation, in this kind of aspect is really, it's, how I can say it? Yeah, it's not profitable for now just to transport the sand from the distances. And of course, globally, we also can have sand shortage in the end of the day.
But then, of course, all it takes is, a shift in market prices. If that sand was suddenly worth way more on the other side of the world and they were willing to pay for it, and, and the supply chain then existed for it, you would soon find that the shortage shifted, or that the price shot up at this end to kind of like, no, it must stay here.
Yeah, so that's also very interesting, I think, because one of the supplementary cementitious materials in concrete is, as I mentioned, GGBS, which is granulated ground blast furnace from steel production, which is quite commonly used in the UK. And the reason why is because it makes the properties of concrete are slightly better, the durability is better, and the workability is better. But at the same time, we don't have this material available in the UK. Almost all this material is imported from other countries. And the price of this material is quite high comparable to cement itself. And therefore, even if we don't have it available here, we import it from other countries. And globally, as a global commodity, it's rather than be used in other countries because of the price, we can afford to buy it and we just take it and we use it. So that's the other aspect. So yeah, the trade itself, it's quite important. And yeah, it's I don't know exactly how much GGBS we will have in the future, but I know shutting down or switching all the steel production, primary steel production routes, we would definitely decrease the amount of GGBS in the industry. And one of the reasons why we use GGBS, because the GGBS has lower carbon footprint as well to cement. So we would like to substitute cement with GGBS to minimize the carbon footprint. But of course, no, if you use GGBS here, you avoid or you are not allowing the other to use it. So having the money, we buy it, we benefit, we lower the carbon, but at the same time, no one else can use it because that's a limited resource, waste resource. So.
But as well, then there's the actual carbon cost of the transportation of the materials. So if you're shipping those materials around the world to make them, and then obviously you can't, because of the high temperatures that you need for cement production, you can't just, plonk a cement factory just there. They have to be in certain places, then everything has to be transported. And then that's, it's not light material and it has to be transported via, diesel and petrol. So, it's a big challenge.
So, cement plants usually are located near to the quarry where you can have a limestone. So it's not, I haven't seen any, a cement plant very far from the quarry. And shipment or transportation it matters, but of course we can calculate the carbon footprint of transportation from whatever place in the world. So in construction now we are doing that kind of calculations. So we know what emissions are from diesel car, 24 tons lorry, half full or whatever, and we can calculate the carbon footprint both from the production side, transportation, and then construction, for example, site. So we have standards for that, and if we follow the standard route of calculations, you can get some kind of values for that. However, there's quite significant uncertainty in values in carbon values itself, because you are not entirely certain what actually emissions were spent to produce something. So it's all reporting issues and statistical issues. But in the end of the day, we can, having the same methodology, having the same values for having the same carbon coefficients for different materials, we can compare the buildings and
there's something to benchmark against, and something to actually work in terms of reduction. You can see if that number's getting smaller when you're making changes. So let's go a little bit into your day-to-day. So being an academic in building and building materials, what are you doing largely? Are you sort of doing little studies in the lab and then going out to a building site and seeing how things are working there? Like, how are you just spending your time lecturing, or is it a mix of everything? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day?
So it depends. In Leeds, now I'm full-time researcher, so research fellow, which in my full-time is just to focus on the research. So desk studies, visiting in the industrial partners' facilities, production sites, collect the data on, for example, my role is I'm looking partly on the waste stream in the foundation industry, especially in cement and steel, and how those kind of waste we can use in the other industries. So we have X waste from, for example, steel production, and can we use this waste to close the circularity loop, in the other industries? So recycling or reuse that kind of waste. to prevent landfill, those waste in the end of the day. So desk study, visiting in companies, giving presentations. Sometimes I'm asked to provide some kind of workshops or presentation, for the companies. Writing papers, writing reports, and just focus on the project itself and meeting the project requirements, because every single project that is funded, has some kind of plan, delivery plan, and we need to deliver what we've promised. So packages, work packages, are split into the different sections, and we have to fulfill or fill those kind of all requirements. But in general desk study, now I'm not involved in lab tests. When I was during my PhD, I spent 5 years in a structural lab mixing concrete. So that was my almost full-time job was to mix mortar and concrete and cast the concrete in the concrete molds or formwork and find.
So were you in like a big warehouse for that, or was it like a small room? You're not working with test tubes, obviously, doing that. So like, what was the lab like?
So yeah, so in when I was doing my PhD, the lab was something like 80 times 40 meters.
Yeah.
Times 9 meters high. So it was a huge warehouse with a strong floor that allows us to make structure testing for
pour lots of concrete.
Yeah. And my part was just to mix concrete and cast the concrete into the mold and find what is the formwork pressure from self-compacting concrete. That's the concrete that flows very quickly. So apart from normal concrete that doesn't flow, we have to vibrate it to release, to compact it and to release all the air that was captured during the mixing process. My PhD was about the slightly newer concrete technology, which is self-compacting concrete, which you don't have to compact because it compacts itself. And because it flows very quickly. We expected that on the construction site we would have issues connected with hydrostatic pressure on the formwork. So if you like to cast concrete, you have to have some kind of mold to cast the concrete. And because concrete weight is 2.5 or 2.4 tons per cubic meter, the hydrostatic pressure at the bottom of the form might be very, very high. So my work was to find what exactly the formwork pressure is when you cast self-compacting concrete. So
what's the hydrostatic pressure? Is that its ability to stay together?
The hydrostatic pressure is just hydrostatic pressure is the height of the water that influence on either the ground or the side of the formwork.
Yeah.
So if you have, for example, 1 meter high of water, the hydrostatic pressure is 1 meter times the density, which is 1. So the hydrostatic pressure at the bottom is the height of the water times the density.
Right.
And in concrete case, when the concrete flows very quickly, we might expect that hydrostatic pressure in concrete is 1 meter of height of the concrete times 2.4 tons per cubic meter, which is density. So 2.5 times more than water.
Okay.
But it didn't. So I found that it doesn't have that kind of high pressure on the formworks because
Is there an explanation for that yet? Did you discover why that was, or was that just not as expected?
So the self-compacting concrete, it flows, but it has some the properties, so-called thixotropic properties, which makes the concrete when it doesn't move. So when it moves, it flows, and the faster you move the concrete faster moves. If you don't move concrete, it starts to stiff. And because of this reversible stiffness, because the thixotropic behavior is reversible stiffness, it starts to, or the formwork pressure starts to decrease with stiffness. But of course, that's reversible stiffness. But yeah, thixotropic behavior is the faster you shake, for example, the the material, the faster it flows. And if you don't shake it or if you don't move it, it starts to make the material starts to be more stiff. Yeah, so I spent a few years in the lab, massive lab, and then I was doing my in situ research on the construction site, on the real construction site, using the same equipment but with the other model, and I wanted to check whether my assumptions and my research are, first of all, applicable on site, and second of all, whether I was wrong or not. And I was not wrong. So my laboratory tests was transferable, or the results could be transferred to the construction site, and it worked.
Cool. Yeah, well, you got your PhD. So what was it like being on site then as an academic, like doing research? Because, you think of sort of media about a build site, you'll get the architect, you'll get the builders, but you don't really see many academics doing field studies. So yeah, how was that?
So because when I was doing my PhD, I wasn't academic yet. So I was doing the PhD. So that's not the academic. However, I hold the degree from civil engineering, and I was supervising the construction site. So I was a supervisor, and at the same time, I was doing my in situ research. So I wasn't the employee. I was just supervising the construction site. So I had 15 to 20 people. No, I was supervising 15 to 20 people. But it was a really good experience, because sometimes, when you are looking for some issues or some aspect of construction from the literature point of view, and then when you go on construction site, those kind of issues either are already solved sometimes, or are very difficult to solve. So sometimes, it's really important for academia, or for the people who are work within the academia, to go to the real world to see how it works. And it taught me a lot, give me a lot of information. So because from the very beginning, of my academic / construction practice journey, I was structural engineer. Well, I work as a assistant of structural engineer. Then, so I was designing the structures, including concrete structures and steel structures. Then I was building those structures. So I just maybe not manual, but I knew how to build them, and I have to know how to build them. And then I went to the academia, where I try to solve those issues that appeared on the construction site and in the design process. So physically, I knew how it was done.
Yeah,
so
you've got that holistic view of the whole process.
Yeah. But it was a really good experience when I was there, because at the very beginning, the people who were hired there was quite concerned that the person who is doing the PhD is supervising the construction site, because they thought that I do not know much about construction site, and they were right. And they told me, and they taught me a lot of different things that were very useful. And I try not to have any barriers. So I try to break all the barriers between them. And so sometimes, I spend all day rather than supervising the construction. So I was supervising construction site, but at the same time, I was doing a steel reinforcement for concrete, and they taught me how to do those steel reinforcement for concrete. Or, for example, when we had a casting or concrete casting time, when we had a concrete delivery, I just took my wellies and I just went them and just to do the job with them. And they were really surprised that someone from the supervisor and from the academic or from the who was doing the PhD was willing to do the work with them and
get down and dirty.
And I, to be honest, I respect them very much, and they I think in the end of the day, they also respect me. So that's a really, really interesting experience. Yeah. But unfortunately, I wasn't working in the UK. I was working in Poland. So the UK, I think, is slightly different. But still, I would love to return one day to the construction site.
You probably will, yeah. So I'm assuming with the funding for you, because there's a number of colleges, a number of universities, institutions involved, but a number being more than one. But is it like public-private? Is there private industry finance as well?
What do you mean exactly?
So is anyone from industry, any private industries, are they invested in your funding? Like, do you have to deliver for industry as well as academia?
Yeah. So the way how it works, so there are a few funding streams that you can apply for. Usually you can apply for the fundings that are from the government, and to get them, it's really important to get the engagement or to get some kind of collaboration with the industrial partners. So there are lots of different, calls, funding calls and project calls that you can apply for. Some of them are more academic with industrial partners. Some of the calls are more focused on industry with academic collaboration. So that's the other side. But in general, the collaboration is really, really important. And what I found over the last couple of years, that more companies are willing to fund PhDs or have fund PhDs in academia. They are willing to supervise projects. So, for example, master's projects. So currently I'm supervising 2 students with other academic partners. In this kind of case, so if you have master's degrees or master projects or PhD projects, collaboration with the industry accelerate your work.
Yeah.
Because, the industrial partners provide you information how it really works.
Yeah.
And then you are just making a research how we can improve that, or how we can find something new, or how you make some kind of innovations. Yeah. And then if you have, industrial partner on board, the ideas could be very quickly implemented in the industrial sectors. So especially in the construction industry, I found it quite maybe not common, but the industrial partner starts to be much more visible, in the projects and as a collaborators. So the project that I'm involved in, so transforming foundation industries, we have, I don't want to make any mistake in that, but I think we have something 80 industrial partners.
Wow. Yeah.
Across 5 foundation industries. So metals, cement, plastics, glass, and ceramics, and I think and the chemicals. So 5, 6. So that's quite a lot. But they know that they will benefit from collaboration with us, and vice versa. So we know that we can benefit from them if we collaborate. So it's really good to have that kind of collaboration.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the questions now, because I think we've got a good sense of what you're doing. So I'll start off with the COVID question. So I want to take you back to sort of just before lockdown and thinking about when you were told to lock down, if you were told to lock down, if you were, because obviously, well, I don't know if building work was going on. There was still some construction work on. But anyway, if you can take us through sort of going into lockdown, whether it increased were you working more, working less, and has it changed your work now?
Yeah, so when COVID started, I worked at the University of Cambridge on 2 of the projects. And I was just asked, so when all buildings were shut down, I just started working in my apartment, in my house. And to be honest, I worked more. Sometimes I was much more efficient, faster. I wasn't disturbed by meetings, for example. But during the time, I was quite tired, of sitting, alone, by the computer and having the Teams meetings. But at the same time, avoiding travels and, avoiding travels saved me a lot of time that I could spend, for example, even during the lockdown. So I have a dog, so I had to walk with the dog. So I had required devices. So I was working at home. I worked at home long hours, and to be honest, it didn't change much, except that my desk was at my second bedroom.
Yeah, it changed. It changed what you're. I mean, do you mainly work on a laptop or are you on PC? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So it's just where your laptop was placed, really.
Exactly. So I have a second screen and some kind of very good working environment. So it didn't change, except I didn't attend as many meetings as previously. I didn't travel a lot. I didn't travel at all, and we could just focus on the one thing at the time rather than plenty of different things, at the same time, because if you reduce the meetings, you're not having plenty of other thoughts and the ideas. Of course, that's really, really important. But at the same time, if you have plenty of thoughts, you cannot focus on one thing. So
and if you're thinking about one thing too much for too long, especially if you get stuck on it, you need that break to kind of come back with fresh eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
So were you, in terms of work-life balance during that time, you said you were kind of working more at points. Did you manage to kind of, overall, did you just work more, like throw yourself into more work, or did you kind of balance it out a bit?
No, I tried to balance my life. So it was more difficult because you didn't have to get to the office. You should go to the office. You didn't have to go to the meetings. I just had to wake up, and start work, eat something, start working, and it requires from me to control myself, in the way I know there's 8 hours. 8 hours or 9 hours. I need to stop my work. And during the COVID, I bought a rowing machine.
Oh, nice.
So I had a rowing machine, in my garden. So every day rowing and walking with the dog and spending time with my partner. So yeah, in the end of the day, I had to find a balance in this kind of situation, and I found it, I think. And now compared, so the COVID, so now I think academia as well take some kind of lessons from COVID. So reduce meetings, reduce the travels, reduce the things, or flexible working arrangements. So in general, today I'm at the office, but my supervisor say, you can work whatever you like. I'm not insisting you to sit in the office.
Yeah,
that's
9 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the office now is empty. I'm the only one in the office now. But to be honest, I like working from the office. That's slightly different, that it was, a year ago that I had to stay at home. But yeah, it was a really interesting experience, to be honest. But we can learn from that, to be honest, and we can find that some of things that were pre-COVID world are not necessarily important or are not necessarily needed for us to live.
Yeah. I do think I don't think the full effects of it have played out yet. I think that's, it was such a change for a lot of people that it's, that's going to have an effect that we haven't, or maybe we are feeling now, maybe a lot of the sort of what they're calling the cost of living crisis is some of the fallout from lockdown and from people reacting to that and wanting different things and seeing different things.
Yeah. What is quite surprising, maybe it's not surprising, I was expecting that, so that when we were, so no, when COVID didn't finish, so it's still it still runs, so it's still there.
When we said that it had gone away.
yeah. So I was really shocked that people start to travel again and were so, I don't know if there's an expression in English, so thirsty of travels, and they just caught all the flights and they just flew everywhere. And I said, why? It's not very, I think for me it's not very important, just to fly.
Yeah.
somewhere.
Just go somewhere, yeah. For no, like I have to every year.
Yeah. So this year we spent a holiday in Scotland,
Nice.
and it was snow. We 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 had a very nice time. So we rent the former boothie, because the mountaineering association had booths in Scotland,
Right, yeah.
and some of them, because of the damages, some of them were closed, and you can hire them, you can rent them for very, in general, very cheap. And we rent one former boothie, and we spent there one week without electricity, without any cell phone or service, without running water, but the place was on a beach in the end of the nowhere, and to get there you had to hike 2.5 hours. So you were off the grid for 1 week, and it was so nice.
I mean, that sounds like a nightmare to a lot of people, but a lot of other people, it's like, oh God, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, so it was really cheap, and it meets all the requirements, and we could switch our brains totally off, and just to focus on the very important thing. So it's called how you can get the warm in those, how you can get the wood for a fireplace or something. Those kind of issues were very important, not how many beers today I can drink. So it was really, really nice. And when I see that kind of, again, the travels, and traveling, and the plane travels are related to the carbon emissions and everything else. That's the other aspect, of course. It's totally crazy, how many people without any, I don't want to say without any reason, because there is a reason that they travel, because they need it. It's a desire, that kind of travels. But whether so many times is so needed.
Yeah, well, you could argue as well that it's a manufactured desire. It's largely through advertising, and
I definitely agree with you. Yeah. So yeah, but no, that wasn't the topic of today's conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. Let's do the climate change question, because it's come up a fair bit already. So the question normally is, how can you in your work adapt to or change or respond to climate change? Obviously, your work is directly sort of involved in responding to climate change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is the approach? Is it just reduce carbon, or is it like, how are you just trying to find new ways in? Like, what is the sort of, how is climate change designed into your research?
Yeah, it's really important. I think is one of the main goal to reduce the climate change and to reduce the emissions. So, and behind that kind of topic, there are lots of different things behind this topic. So from the construction point of view, 45% of global CO2 emissions are related to construction. 45%. In total, as far as I remember, 15% of annual carbon emissions are related to materials that goes to buildings and infrastructure. So 15%, it's really massive. The remaining 30% is from building operations, so lighting, cooling, heating, cooking, everything which is related to running the buildings. So it's quite significant. So 40, 45, almost 50% of all the emissions are related to those kind of, to living and to building. So my part, in general, in my research is how we can reduce the materials that goes to the construction, for example. So 8%, 7 to 8% is concrete itself. So almost 1/10 of the global carbon dioxide emissions are from manufacturing of concrete and use of concrete. So this is the volume, the scale of this. So even reduction by 5% from this 8% global emissions makes a huge difference. And of course, when we start, or we already started to decarbonize the electricity grid or to change, energy production to lower carbon sources or to renewables, the share of the carbon dioxide or in general greenhouse gas emissions will increase in favor of materials that we need to produce. Because if we produce electricity from solar power plants or wind power plants, we will decrease the share of those emissions in a global scale. But we cannot avoid the emissions from, for example, concrete production, so process emissions. The share will increase. So there is a topic, there is a huge, area of first of all, what we can do to minimize or to lower the carbon footprint from materials. In my research in construction. So there's a lot of different questions that we should ask ourselves and ask the government and ask everywhere. First of all, do we need so many stuff? Do we need to build buildings? Do we need to build infrastructure projects? Do we need those kind of things? One of the answer might be, construction is responsible for 7% in the UK of GDP. So we need to have construction projects to increase GDP and
give people work.
To give people work, yeah. But on the other side, what is most important? So UK has a legislation that with a end goal 2050 to become net zero carbon country. And how we can do that if we don't cut the use or the construction, whatever it is now in the construction industry. So that's the first aspect. Do we need so many stuff? Do we need so many things? Buildings. COVID taught us a very good lesson. So half of the office space is not used. Why we can't use them for other purposes, for example? Or why we are building new ones.
Why are we building more of something that is there that's not being used?
Exactly. So the other aspect that I'm working also is, do we need so many domestic buildings? Do we need so many dwellings? So according to my estimations now, approximately 4% of all the domestic building stock in the UK is empty. And we have something like, if I'm not mistaken, we have something like 25 million of dwellings. So 4% of this is something like 700,000. I've looked at the statistics of homeless people in the UK, and I've came across with a number of something like 350,000 people are homeless in the UK. So from the very short calculations, you can find that having 750,000 empty buildings, we can give 2 properties to the homeless people.
And then you could add on top of that number of homeless, sort of younger people or hidden homeless people, like people that can't afford to buy yet. And obviously there's all sorts of market related reasons to that. But I mean, there's, in terms of distribution of people, so it's no good if everyone who wants a house is in London, but all the empty houses are in the middle of, some mountain.
But at the same time, having, the lessons from COVID,
working remotely.
Do you really need to live in London? I would love to, for example, from my perspective, I would love to, live in the end of the nowhere in Scotland, for example, or in Aberdeenshire, and just to work remotely. And I have plenty of, maybe not plenty, I know at least 4 people who work in London, but they live in deep north. So it's not a problem now. We can sort it out. No, we don't have to be in the office every day, I think, to make our work done. So that's the first aspect. So apart from the material production side, so one of the ideas is how we can reduce the emissions from material production. So in construction, we have 3 main structural materials, which is concrete, steel, and timber. So we learned how to produce sustainable timber, or how we can produce timber in sustainable way.
Yeah.
We know how to produce steel from steel scrap. So secondary steel production. However, the tricky point is that the current demand, So the volume of the steel that is required every year cannot be sourced from steel scrap because we don't have this huge amount of scrap available.
Yeah, because it's all been used.
yeah. So we can't produce all this new steel from the steel scrap because the steel scrap is unavailable for that kind of huge volume of new steel. And at the same time, with the concrete, we don't have any alternative of the concrete. So that's why the reduction of the emissions of cement and concrete, by introducing new binders, replacing, fuels to the lower carbon fuels. That's the one way. But, if we don't get rid of volume of the materials, we cannot get the reductions.
So you're almost saying that, growth and demand is the problem.
Yes. Yes. So it's maybe not yes and no. So one of the paper that I've submitted 2 weeks ago was about what if by 2035 we stop building any buildings, domestic buildings in the UK. So now I just make some kind of assumptions and I make some kind of modeling. If by 2035 we stop building any detached houses, bungalows, flats and everything else, in 2050 we will have exactly the same floor area per capita than today. So the floor area per capita will increase by 2035, but from 2035, because of the increase in population, we will have exactly the same floor area per capita. I'm not entirely sure whether it's possible to convince everyone to own that kind of small space. And the reason why is because, unfortunately, we are created, or the humans are created in the way that we would like to have much more, have faster, greater, shinier things. We would like to have iPhones every year because of the new design or whatever. We would like to have larger garden. We would like to have better car. And I think that's more. It's not the technological issue. It's more like thinking issue.
Like train of thought.
Yeah.
Like what? Because ultimately, what do you want that for?
Exactly.
It's like, well, what does that actually give you? Does that soothe your soul, or is it, like there's a certain level? It's like that thing with the Maslow of. Well, we'll go on to UBI. Yeah. So I'll go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so because I moved a little bit, from the topic. So in general, in the construction, how we can minimize or how we can reduce the emissions from materials, but how we can use materials much better. But at the very beginning, how we can reduce and avoid buildings or avoid constructing things. It is quite important. One of our study also, and in my group, there were 2 or 3 papers on that as well. So in the building, usually you are not using, so from the structure point of view, so, the columns and slabs, roof, the buildings that we were looking at were massively over-designed, which means that 25 to 35% of materials in the structure were not utilized, so were not used and wasted. So if you just take 25 or 30% of this material from the building, this building will meet all the code regulations or code specifications or all the building requirements, everything. Some of the study even say that 50% of the material is not used in the buildings. So it means that having the building, you could build 2 the same size buildings because you could split the material by half. And it's more the issue of design, specification, and in general, over design of the structure, and not using very efficient control systems.
So it's kind of like the bits that are there for the aesthetic are purely aesthetic.
Yeah. So for example, functional. or for example, open space with a long span, with a long, between columns. The longer the span you have, the higher carbon intensity the square meter it has. So in general, the shorter span, the better. So the shorter, if you decrease the span by 1 meter from 7.5, for example, to 6.5 meter, which is quite large as well. Still, you could save 20% of embodied carbon per square meter of the building, just shortening the span. But of course,
because it's carrying more weight, and because it's sort of, I guess, it's holding up more weight, and therefore it needs to be stronger and or bigger to carry that more weight.
So in general, the longer the span you have, the deeper the slab you will have to have. So and it's exponential. It's not for
it's example, not like a linear thing.
It's not linear.
It just doubles and doubles.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And at the end, so how we can reduce carbon emissions and making the structure more efficient, and I think the finding innovations in construction. So what other materials we can use for the construction purposes. Now, we are trying to look, to step back a little bit, and try to use much more natural materials, such as, ram earth or timber, or, for example, stone. So one of the strategies is to step back and just to look what was used, a couple of decades before, and just to find a way how we can avoid using the raw materials to produce with a high energy intensive processes, the materials that we are using now. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So yes. So our work in general, it's really, really important because of the volume. Volume matters, and there's so many aspects, and construction industry is so fragmented that it's really hard to get one solution. There are plenty of different solutions, and we have to apply different solutions for the different actors of the supply chain to get the final, carbon reduction targets.
But the only way ultimately you can influence that, I mean, even if you produce a shit hot paper that tells you everything, that like, unless there's a financial incentive or a regulatory incentive to make such changes. I mean, obviously there's a existential need to, but unless, within the reality of humans doing their thing, unless there's a money reason to do it or a legal reason to do it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, legislation is one very important aspect. So more and more I can see in the different countries, and as well in London, for example, if you like to get the planning permission to build buildings or very high-rise buildings, you would need to make the whole life carbon assessment, which gives you some kind of idea what the carbon footprint of the building would be like. So one of the part of the planning permission or planning application is to prove that your buildings is not very high carbon intensive according to benchmark or something. Of course, now we are at the very beginning of this journey. So we are creating the benchmarks now. We are trying to find the best way of making the carbon calculations. But it started. It started and it's really good. And sometimes you cannot get the permissions if you have very high carbon intensive building. There was one case, I don't want to name it, the case in London, but no, it was rejected because of the use of quite significant amount of materials, and materials are directly related to carbon, and therefore the permission wasn't given. So it happens, and legislation started to be a quite good driver. There is a lot of consultancy between the academia, industry, and government on how we can accelerate changes, how we can make the transformation changes, in the construction and other sectors. So it happens, and it wasn't so rapid 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's like scaling up fast. Yeah,
it is really, really fast now.
Yeah.
So legislation, yes, construction supply chain and changing the behavior. Yes, definitely financial incentives. Yes, because that's related. And yeah, so those kind of aspects, but those kind of aspects are really difficult to investigate, or maybe not investigate, but to suggest some changes. But we are getting there. I'm really positive in this kind of area.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel positive because you're kind of like taking action and you're seeing some progress, or is it just really frustrating and you're kind of like, we need to be doing more faster? Like, does it? I mean, it obviously helps to be working on something where you can see changes happening.
So in the area that I'm working on, so I'm involved in some work with Institution of Structural Engineers in the UK, as well as Institution of Civil Engineers and other institutions, or the Concrete Center, which is trade association, or Mineral Product Association, which is also trade body for mineral products. And yes, they do a really great job. They publish the guidelines or the reports on how, from the client or the user or the structural engineer or civil engineer perspective, we can reduce the emissions, how we can avoid waste in each stage of the construction process, or those kind of things. So in the construction industry, it's over the last 2 or 3 years, it moved very quickly, and there are results. They were published few reports or few roadmaps that gives you some kind of ideas what we should do to minimize the embodied carbon of, for example, concrete, and when it should be done to reach the target, for example, what we should develop to get there, who should be responsible for what. So it starts to happen. Yeah, and it starts to be really, really quickly. Sometimes the speed, sometimes in some cases, the speed is not related with the quality. But in the end of the day, it's better to do something and then revise something than do nothing.
Yeah. So you've got to try different things to see what the results are. You might stumble across something that you never thought of,
Yeah. So and the collaborative work, it's in the construction industry, starts to be very extremely visible. So I was involved in so-called low carbon concrete roadmap in the UK that was published in April this year, and that was collaborative work with structural engineers, architects, clients, academia, contractors, and so all the people who are engaged or who are involved in the construction process. And it was quite unusual to gather those people. 5 years ago, it was 5 or 8 years ago, it was quite unusual to gather those people around the round table and just to publish or to accept or to agree on some kind of strategies. Now it starts to happen. And the big players are really aware of those kind of issues to do the right work.
But it's that sort of peer pressure effect. I mean, but at a business level, the competitive element of, well, if they find out something that we need to know, or they're ahead of us on a curve, well, we don't want to be playing catch up. We want to be there involved in the conversation.
Yeah. So that's the one thing. The second thing now is some sort of race. Who can get the lower carbon? Who can get the zero carbon buildings? If that kind of reports are in collaboration with others, the solutions are much more possible.
Yeah, like more realistic. Because
more realistic. Yeah.
Because if people aren't buying into it, it's not going to work. Again, it's that same problem of just one individual actor or one company or one way of doing it. I wanted to go back as well, because I know you highlighted this, but it occurred to me as well. The fact that they are putting these benchmark measurements on, because once you start to see those metrics and those measurements on paper and how big they are and how much effect you can actually have with easy wins, I suppose, it does make a difference, because it's like, because you can see the problem then. rather than it being, completely abstract. It's something that you can visualize.
Yeah, so it's really important, I think, and I try to tell students that kind of understanding of measurement of metrics or the what exactly 1 kilo of carbon dioxide means. So this year I had a lecture in the University of Bath because I was hired because I moved to the University of Leeds recently. In April. Before I was at the University of Bath, and before that I was at the University of Cambridge. When I was in Bath, I had a great opportunity to give the lecture to students, and it was 15th of December, just before Christmas break, and the topic was lowering the carbon, embodied carbon in concrete structures, and I gave a really good example. I think you are aware or the building in London, which is the Shard. So the carbon intensity of the structure of the Shard is approximately 1 ton of carbon dioxide. Every single square meter is a 1 ton, so 1,000 kilograms of CO2. And this is the equivalent. So if you like to describe it, how much is that? So this is the equivalent of journey with an average 2019 UK car from Bath to Bethlehem for a Christmas break and return. So that's the one ton of CO2 emissions. So that's the one. I don't remember how many kilometers is that, but no, that's the equivalent. So the journey, journey. Yeah. I was doing more the calculations yesterday. How much using my car so what is the carbon cost of getting with my car from Leeds to Poland, where I live, and return? And it turns out it's 450 kilograms of carbon dioxide, which is the equivalent of approximately 2 cubic meters of concrete. So those kind of, it's really important to
realize the scale,
be able to visualize it. And I like that kind of comparisons because that gives you some kind of idea what we how we understand that, and then we can just feel if someone tells you what the carbon intensity of this or the journey from London to, for example, Boston, which is I think 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So as far as I remember, I think when I flew to Boston 4 years ago, on the ticket I think I had something like 1,400 kilograms of CO2, which is the equivalent of, or it's 40% more than 1 square meter of the Shard. so those kind of informations are also very important, just to realize, and I can do that kind of comparison all the time because they're really really interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to another question. I'm going to go with the UBI question to start. So if there was a universal basic income, would you still be doing what you do? And if you would still be doing what you do, would you be doing it the same way?
So the first question, IBU is the...
So universal basic income. So if you were given like a state income, like a set amount that was enough to live on. So basically your hierarchy of needs is met. How would that change your work? Would you still work? And if you would you stay in this work? And if you would that change?
So I'll be very happy. Yes. So I was thinking about it. So definitely, if there is a chance to have that kind of scheme, I'll be very happy. At the same time, I could work half or maybe a third of the time, but developing much more impactful ideas. So I'm not sure if I would make that kind of desk study all the time, but I would like to first of all focus on the things that I would like to develop, because now because I'm the research associate or research fellow, I'm linked to the projects that I need to work on, which sometimes it doesn't allow me to develop my own ideas because there is a lag of time. So if I have a time, I would develop my own ideas, and then I would definitely go for this kind of route. I would love to spend some time to teach students or to teach people, to teach in general, because I really like teaching, really like the knowledge and be useful and showing that kind of things that we've talked about.
It's no good knowing stuff if you can't tell people the stuff. It's like, well, exactly. I need to share this.
So I really like. One time when I was traveling to Brussels with one of the sustainable directors from one of the construction companies, we had a 2.5 hours trip from London, and I was talking about concrete all the way, 2.5 hours. And he said to me after the journey, he said that he had never ever met the person who talked about concrete in a so passionate way and in so simple way. So which means that it's just. So he was so very interested in this kind of topic, and I still make the collaboration with him. So I'm still in contact with him. So I really like, just to try to, if I'm at that kind of scheme, I would not sit in my house and do nothing. I would I would love to do some useful things, which means changing, the teaching or teaching of students, or definitely develop the ideas. And then I would not be, because when you work, you are always under some pressure, lower or higher. But in general, I could get rid of all that kind of pressure.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about a contract when the contract ends, or I've got to move here. And if you were remote working, you could just stay in the one shed in Scotland and work in every university whenever you needed to.
Exactly. So definitely I would not waste my time. By the way, with wasting the time, if you get a rest, it's not wasting your time. You are just getting rest. So wasting the time is, it's, I don't know even how I can describe wasting the time. Never mind.
Wasting the time. I think dead time is when it's when you're too exhausted, or when you're overextended or overstressed. It's that you're not producing good work then.
Yes,
I don't think.
Yes.
You don't always need to be like happy and in a perfect mood. You can be a bit grumpy and like have a groggy day, but there's a difference between that and being ragged and burnt out and really stressed about life, and you have to try and focus on a job when you've got all that in your head. It's it's making that easier, I think.
So that's why I started to think about launching my own company a couple of years ago, and that might allow me to do that kind of work. However, I will have all the time, in mind that I have to earn the money to cover my my needs and
do everything for the business as well, and exactly. And get the people in and look after people and market, and it's So, but I mean, when you're ready and you've got the idea and you've got the passion for it, you do it if you're going to do it.
Yeah. But the short answer, for this question is definitely I would like to still develop the ideas that I work on and teach students how they can implement those kind of research and that kind of thinking in the construction, in the industry, in further disseminate those kind of findings, because I think that's the change. So if we just disseminate and if we talk to people and it's not about convincing the people, but to show.
Give them the information.
Give them the information.
Yeah.
Because we are in I don't know the expression, but we have so many informations around from the social medias, from emails, from news, from everything else. We can't we might find those informations are not true or mislead. So
it's like the common wisdom, the public perception of what the public perceives to be perceived.
So
which is generally wrong. And then if people had the actual information, and they could make their own decisions either way politically, but it's like if you actually had the real information of what's happening, you could make better decisions.
Exactly. So there's miscommunication definitely, and and the quality of the information sometimes is not very good. So having, that kind of, I'm not saying that I have huge experience now in this kind of field, but I have some experience, so maybe more than average. So if there is a chance to get that kind of skill, I would definitely like to teach, disseminate, talk, and find, what, and try to, if I find something wrong. So now, when I'm reading a lot of different papers and lots of different, article news about different things, there are so many mistakes. There are so many misleading informations, and I'm trying to contact to the editor just to say, oh, that's wrong. No, you can't. You have to change it. And I've done it a few times. To the different associations, to different not journals, but magazines.
But I think that leads quite nicely into what I'm going to cover next. So, social media. So I ask about this because we call it social media. I'm starting to call it work media because it's more and more part of our lives. More and more of us have to do it as part of our job, whether we're appearing, you're appearing in a podcast now. So how much social media is there in your work? How much do you have to do? And is the time that you spend doing social media work a good use of your time? Does that bring, do you have to do it to find investors, and does it bring investors in, or how does social media work for you?
So now currently I'm using only two, maybe. I don't know if I can name them.
It depends what you're using them for. If it's for work purposes.
So for work purposes, no, I'm using usually LinkedIn, which is really good platform for sharing the information, sharing the dissemination of our results of, when we are trying to, we now some kind of job advertisements or adverts. We post it on LinkedIn, and because in general I have a few followers, there are some people who respond on that, and it's a really good platform for dissemination to knowledge sharing. But again, it's very fast, quick, just a short message without any very detailed information.
It's very superficial.
Yeah. And I'm not spending, hours on Facebook. Yesterday I checked, statistics, something like 3-4 minutes a day. So it's just nothing, which is because what I found a few years ago that, sometimes it could take you 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to swipe, the Facebook and informations and then look what's happening. So no, I'm trying to avoid that kind of, not wasting the time, but spending the time for that kind of platforms. But I'm trying not to spend a lot of time for doing that, because 3 years ago I found myself spending a lot of time on the social media, and it wasn't productive. It wasn't very efficient. So I'd rather spend a very short time.
How much of your working time is spent? Because I would imagine that you will need to do quite a lot of networking, because you're in a specialized area, and it will be, a finite pool of people, but you need to be seen, you need to be present. So how much, and you need to make connections for other projects and other things. So how much time is spent, say, at conferences or doing other forms of networking to kind of meet other people in the industry?
So on average, in a day, something like 1 hour. In 1 hour, it's a time that I'm spending, on making the connections with the other industrial partners, or asking about something from them, or having some kind of introduction, calls to the people that I don't know, and I would like to present more of our projects or that kind of stuff. The conferences, so I to be honest, my last conference that I was in, it was pre-COVID. I haven't been to the conference since 2019, end of 2019, something like that. But I need to start, writing the conference papers just to be more visible. Definitely, maybe not visible, but disseminate the results much wider. But of course, conferences are very narrow, with a very narrow audience as well. So
podcasts.
To be honest, one of my friends told me that I have quite a good voice for a podcasting. I have no idea if that's true or not, but yes, they told me that just go for it. And I would love to make the first YouTube video one day and just post it and see what happens.
Okay, so we've done the social media. We'll do Brexit. So since we've left the EU, has that changed your work at all? And if it has it been for the better or for the worse?
So I'm not an employer. So I'm just research associate, and I'm here in the UK for the last 7 years. So I'm settled here. So I have settled status. So it didn't change much, apart from the fact that if I'm crossing the border, I have to show the passport rather than ID, and it didn't change.
I suppose a lot of your research is based in the UK on UK, and you're not buying materials yourself. I mean, was there much interaction, like research sharing with Europe? Were you involved in any of that before?
So with knowledge sharing and that kind of things, it didn't, or the Brexit didn't influence on that. So we just go.
It's not impacted funding streams or anything for you?
Funding streams, yes. But I didn't apply for the European projects. I don't know how it influenced on the European project that I would like to apply from the UK. Definitely influenced, but I'm not entirely sure how, because as I said, I didn't apply for the European funded projects yet. Only UK focused, and my research in general is UK focused. So nothing to say much about it. Regarding because we are trying to find the new researchers for our projects, or we are posting lots of different job advertisements for the projects. If you have the people either from the European Union or from outside the European Union, you have to apply for all visa things and other things. So it's much complicated. But I don't have much experience on that. I was told that it's longer process and much more expensive. Yeah. But I cannot say any more detailed things.
Yeah. So if you could change any three things about your work, any three things, so you've got carte blanche, it can be as realistic or as fantastical as you want. What would you change? Any three things about your job?
That's really interesting question. To be honest, I cannot find anything, to be honest, now that I would like to change if I can change something. Because I really like the job that I'm doing now, and I like the work with the people who I work with. I like the work arrangements.
I've got one for you.
Which one?
Discovering carbon-free concrete and cement.
There is carbon-free concrete.
All right, but at scale, you know what I mean. Like,
yes, of course,
finding the key.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you are looking at the research area, I would like to find the answer for one question.
Okay.
Which is how we can avoid consumption. Which means that that is my one of the previous thoughts that I had a couple of minutes ago. So what we should do to increase or to provide the service, whatever service means, so buildings, infrastructure, and so on, at the same time using less resources and as less carbon as possible to get to the point that we don't use anything. What do we should change? So I'm not entirely sure whether it's technical problem. I'm quite sure that it's non-technical issue, but I haven't found any, that's not my expertise, but I would thought that it's more social, government, country,
or even spiritual, how we consume. And I'm reading how you said that as kind of building things to last rather than just build something because we can build a thing, we've got money for it and make it last 10 years and then we'll knock it down and we'll build another thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or we just build something with loads of extra things on to make it look nice and charge more money for it, but we don't need the extra things.
Yeah, exactly. So those kind of aspects, of last 3 years, I was starting to think, what we should change and what we should target our efforts to make a change. Because as I said, it's quite interesting that the average car lifetime of the car in the UK is 7 years, something. And in continental Europe, or if I looked at the statistics in Poland or in Lithuania or Latvia, it's 20 years. So, and the average, lifetime of the washing machine, I don't know what's the lifetime of the washing machine here. It's 2 or 3 years, whereas in other countries it's twice as long. I always say that we have a technology that allows us to land on the Mars. We have almost unlimited technology in our hands
and knowledge.
Knowledge is great, of course, but the knowledge doesn't change
the behaviors,
and the needs and the desires. So yeah, this is what I would like. This is one of the questions that I would like to answer someday. And it's not about change. It's just about, maybe that is the change. If I have a blank sheet of paper and I would like to change one thing, I would like to just make a click and change all the behavioral and things, just to start to live at the same level or in the higher level.
Yeah.
The
I know
higher
what you mean. Yeah, like move up a standard rather than sort of heading down.
But
level up, as they would say in the media.
Oh yeah.
But actually,
it's a really interesting question. Yeah, I need to think about it.
Good. Well, at least I've given you something to think about, other than all the thinking that you're already doing. Right. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Oh no, I'll turn it over to you just in case if there's anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention, or anything that you want to highlight, or if you want to signpost anything, over to you.
Thank you. What I would like to. I was thinking about that kind of question, and I would like to promote one thing, which is living slower and having more, outdoors activities. Because, if you make yourself tired, your thinking is better and you are doing much more wisely decisions, wise decisions. I think that this is my experience. So just slowing down. I think
slow down, enjoy things.
Yeah. Exactly.
Don't rush.
Because it can help definitely, because now I think what I found is we don't have a time to think. So having that kind of
like with COVID, I mean, we've kind of had this discussion. I've had this discussion in a few interviews in terms of like, okay, that was the time to slow down and think, but it was also a huge, big event where loads of stuff was going on, but then also nothing was going on. And then we restarted all of this and it's all chaos again. And it's like, where's the time? Where's the thinking time for that? What have we actually, like, what have we processed from that? And but the media's just gone, no, we're on to 10 other things now.
Yeah. So definitely the main message is slowing down or slow down. And it doesn't mean that you have to work slower or move slower. It's just to give yourself a time to rethink what is very important. I think that's the one thing which it's quite important, and it relates both to the work, to the private life, to every single aspect of our lives. And I think the second thing is just to think what exactly you need to have, for when you live, when you have the house or something, what exactly you need for living. It means that what exactly you need to give you happiness.
Yeah.
Go for a walk with the dog. Go hiking. We live. I live in Leeds, and it's really brilliant to go to Yorkshire Dales and just to hike somewhere or to climb somewhere, to forget about the normal everyday life.
Go outside, look at some greenery, sit down.
Yeah, exactly.
Watch the birds and the bees for 5 minutes.
True. So this is it.
Thank you again to Michal for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. And of course, most of all, thank you to you, my dear listener. So, Leeds, if you think you have something interesting to teach me about your job, business, cause, or industry, then get in touch with me to be a guest on this show. You could advertise your business or cause, tell everyone how great your company is, or talk about that awful boss, or even a great one. They exist. Bosses or not, if you live or work in Leeds, or you are from Leeds and you work elsewhere, then I'd love to hear about what you do, how it affects you, what you wanted to do, and what you would like to do differently. You can contact and follow this show on Twitter at WorkingHours3 and on Instagram at WorkingHoursPodLeeds. Please do chuck in anything you can to help the show grow. Go to ko-fi.com/working-hours and join me there for £1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation of whatever amount. You can also go to patreon.com/working-hours-pod to support Working Hours, again from as little as £1 a month. Why not be super awesome and join both? Do something new and something different. Remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to Working Hours. That's me. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Please like Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Leeds, are you considering taking the plunge into podcasts or audio content? Then think Western Studios for support, advice and guidance on getting it made. At Western Studios, you work with a real-life learner who is actually in Leeds. Not a piece of software, not a course of articles or a series of live chats and video courses, but me, a person in physical place-based reality. If you want to work with me to make your podcast or any digital audio content in Leeds, whether it's for your own cause, your publicity campaigns, to promote your products, increase your sales, or just to create your own passion projects, then get in touch with me, Western Studios, now. Don't wade through vapid articles and videos and podcasts about how to make podcasts by disembodied virtual people on the web. Get on with making your podcast now, and then when it gets hard and expensive and it all goes wrong, which it will, then call Western Studios to make your podcast with you or even for you. Western Studios will take on your podcast's boring, time-consuming and painful admin, recording, editing, transcription, whatever. Tell me about your podcasting pain points and I can make it all better for you. I feel your pain. For a charge, I will share it. Remember, podcast work is work. Leeds businesses, Leeds campaigns, Leeds brands. Got an inkling that you'd like a podcast but don't know where to start? Contact Western Studios at makemypodcast@western-studios.com and we'll start making your podcast straight away. The first hour of arranged consultation and pre-production time is free. £25 an hour after that for editing, recording, production. I can also arrange hefty discounts for the right project. So tell me your idea and your budget and I'll tell you what I can do for you. What do you have to lose? Time. That's what. Time is running out. The best time to make a podcast was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. Writers in Yorkshire, what are you doing with your lives? Hopefully you're writing. Well, I know there are listeners out there who want to hear great original writing performed as audio content that is about and for and has been made in Leeds. How do I know this? Because I'm one of them loiners what wants it. Help me make your old screenplays, unpublished novels, unperformed plays, stories, poems, and performances, whatever you got, baby, and make it as podcast content. Is your work arty, salacious, pulpy, strange? Good. Is it unfinished? Good. I can help you with that too. I can work with you to find actors, musicians, and voiceover artists and quickly realize your projects. I get practice making the shows and you get a finished, performed and published version of your writing. Save yourself the hassle and the headache of making your podcasts on your own by working with me instead.